Welcome everybody. Today's mitzvah is another example of a mitzvah that doesn't apply to everyone, but by understanding the significance of the mitzvah, the ideas behind the mitzvah, everybody can benefit from it. Today's mitzvah is a positive commandment to make tassels, tzitzis, al kanfei vigdehem, on the corners of their garments. Let's read through this in the English and then we'll discuss a little bit as well. Okay. It is a positive commandment to make tassels, tzitzis, at the corner of their garments. As scripture states, they shall make for themselves tassels on the corners of their garments. V'asu lahem tzitzis al kanfei vigdehem. When it is a garment that a person wears by day, which has 4 corners or more, and its size is small enough for a small boy who can go alone in the street, need no other person to watch him, I'll explain all this, to cover his head and most of his body with it, and the garment is of wool and linen, it must have tzitzis by the law of the Torah, but other kinds of cloth require tzitzis only by law of the sages. If someone clothes himself in a garment that has 4 corners and he has not put tzitzis on it, he has disobeyed a positive commandment. A youngster who knows how to wrap himself properly has the obligation of tzitzis by the law of the sages. It is necessary to be very careful about the commandment of tzitzis, since scripture made it equal in importance to all the mitzvos, attaching them all to it. As scripture says, Uri'isem oso, you should see it, Uzdechartem es kol mitzvos Hashem, and you will remember all of the mitzvos of God. It is in effect everywhere, at every time, for males, but not for females. So, we have a mitzvah of tzitzis, and the mitzvah of tzitzis is that we carry a reminder with us, a consciousness raiser, on if a male happens to be wearing a 4-cornered garment. We're not going to discuss females now. I'll take the questions offline. If a male is wearing a 4-cornered garment and it's made of wool or linen, it has to have tzitzis on it. That's a Torah commandment. If it's made from a different material, according to the Torah, it wouldn't have to have tzitzis, but rabbinically it does. This interestingly comes up with wool and linen. It's hard to play basketball in wool tzitzis in the summer, like it gets really hot. So they started to make tzitzis out of this mesh. Now, the mesh is wonderful because it's not hot and you're wearing tzitzis, but now you're only fulfilling a rabbinic commandment, not a Torah commandment. All right, people worry about these things. Now, I will add in that the 4-cornered garment, the idea behind the 4-cornered garment is, again, is a consciousness raiser, Uri'isem, so you'll see it and you'll remember all the mitzvos of God. Now, the it that you're going to see that will lead you to remember the mitzvos of God is actually really the psil tcheles. It's the sky blue wool color. The mitzvah of tcheles, the mitzvah, very few people have tcheles in their tzitzis, which is a little bit of a mystery, and I have to include myself. Kind of never been sure why I haven't done it, but there's supposed to be a blue fringe in the tzitzis. Now, most of us don't have that, and the reason for that is that the production of the blue string simply stopped, and nobody had the blue dye for the blue skin anymore, and they simply forgot. I don't know, how do you make that blue string? What do you use to dye the blue string? It's been rediscovered in modern times that there's a particular snail, Murex something. I guess Murex tells you it's a snail, so that's not helpful. But anyway, there's a snail of some sort that if you crush it and you expose its dye, you expose some fluid to the air, it will turn blue. And that's what they used to make the tcheles. There were major production centers of this up and down the Mediterranean coast, and in particular, the northern part of the Mediterranean Israeli coast. There were production centers for tcheles. And we now, archaeologically, we have those production centers. We know what they used. We know the snail that they used. We know the procedure that they used. And yet, because halachically out there in the universe, there's still some debate, and nobody's 100%, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but the halachic world has decided to be unsure about what tcheles is, so we don't have tcheles on our tzitzis. It's a very worthwhile area of exploration in and of itself, because the fact is, you know, anybody with a sense of history and science realizes that the tcheles is available, so I guess we should be using it. Anyway, sky blue thread. So what's the sky blue thread? So the Talmud tells us that the sky blue thread reflects the ocean, which reflects the heavens, which reflect the bottom of the chariot of God, and the bottom of the chariot of God reflects truth. In other words, when you look at the blue thread, you think of the ultimate truth, the spiritual truth of God is reflected in the 613 commandments, and then you say, gee, I want to do those commandments. That's the idea, remembering that the commandments are a divine truth, and because they are a divine truth, we need to go out and fulfill those commandments. Okay, thanks for being with us. Our next mitzvah, which will apply to also men but not women, remarkably enough, and we'll talk about that as well, is the mitzvah to recite the Kriya Shema in the morning and in the evening. That'll be next time. Thanks for being with us.